for me, I think through this wellness journey, what really helped me was not just pass through the journey, but to actually enjoy that journey and actually feel a lot of gratitude for what you have in that journey. Because a lot of people, I don't think we pause enough to even appreciate what we have, especially when I see so many others who just don't even have quarter of a lot of those things that we have.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Shalini. How are you doing today, Shalini?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
I'm really excited to get into this conversation today.
So am I.
It's one of those things that's it's absolutely amazing how you're able to connect with people from literally all over the world.
Thank you. I think the journey has just started, is how I want to think about it. And so there's a long road ahead.
I always like to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How did we actually get connected?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, we got connected through Facebook. And I think it was, a guest speaker post. And so I reached out and shared my story, or I guess shared my page. And yeah, I think that's how we got connected.
It's one of those things, and I know we talked a little bit before the show. One of the things I love about social media, of course, it does have its drawbacks, and there are those negative things about it. But one of the things I love, I get to connect with people from literally all over the world.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
And we'll get into your podcast a little bit later, but it's one of those things we were both talking ahead of time. It's amazing. We get to talk to so many unique people, but also secretly get to ask our own questions and kind of get our own insight too.
Yes, yes. That's the magic, right? It's the win win. So,
So I want to know a little bit more about you, that comic book issue number one, that origin story. Who are you?
wow. All right. So I'm going to try and keep this short because I know I could probably talk a lot about this. So, again, if I just take a step back and rewind, I would say most of, again, I was born in Malaysia, but then I grew up in India and I was there till, I was about 16 years old. And I grew up with a lot of family members around me. So there was always family, cousins. There was just so much human element as I was growing up. And it was a very different world. And at the age of 19, I decided to come to the United States, which is very unusual because those days, and this was many years ago without revealing an age, but many years ago, I came from a very conservative family, and it was a big deal for my dad to say, okay, to let me go to a new country where I didn't really know anyone. But I guess my mom was a big inspiration and a push for all of this because really the only goal I had was, getting educated, but also, becoming financially independent and to stand up for myself and also hopefully inspire women later in my life. That was really the goal I had, when I look back and when I was 19 and landed here. So yeah, I was really just with two suitcases coming here, figuring out my identity, figuring out, everything here. So that's how my journey started. And then fast forward, I basically got into the corporate tech industry. That's where I am at full time. That's what I do in the day. And I'm a mom of two wonderful girls. They are a big part of my life. And I live here in Seattle with my partner. And yeah, this Seattle has been home for over 20 years. So, yep, that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's incredible. Of all the places in the world, what drew you to the United States at 19?
It was honestly the land of opportunities. And I knew a couple of my friends who were, trying to get to the United States at that time. And also, I think I have to say, when I think about this, when I was growing up and I saw a lot of girls, a lot of women, where I don't think it just came easy for them to have their financial independence and for them to kind of do what they wanted to do. I mean, including my own mom. So I saw that, right? So that was something I really wanted to change. I wanted to change and challenge that status quo and what I had seen around me. And I knew that if I had to do that, I probably had to go to a land where there was a lot more freedom. There was a lot more opportunity to express and build your own identity. So honestly, that was probably the very little bit that I knew at the age of 19, because obviously, I mean, there was a lot of maturity there to, get to where I am now to reflect back. But at that time, I think I really had that only at a very surface level. That was something I had noticed.
Now, out of curiosity, have you ever visited the United States before, or was it just what you have heard and read about? And as you mentioned, you had some friends that were there as well.
It's only what I had heard. It was the first time, yes, that I landed here, and it's a long flight. It's over 20 hours in flight to come from India to the United States. And guess what? I actually landed in Michigan, where I also saw snow for the first time in my life. So there was a lot of first times when I came here at 19.
Now, it's one of those things. Take me through. It's one thing to say you want to kind of experience something new and change your future. Now you actually get to the United States. What was that first couple days like?
Wow. Gosh, you took me back down the memory lane. I'm just like trying to recollect how those first few days. The first thing I think actually I still remember came to my mind when I landed and I said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." Only a few hours in, I realized, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to eat?" And I think that's when I realized again those days, and I'm also a vegetarian. So those days it was pretty hard. I mean, to find vegetarian food. And at the age of 19, yeah, my mom will swear she taught me some cooking skills, but I would say I just kind of, glanced through all of that and I said, yeah, I got it, but I don't think I really knew how to make stuff. So that was actually the hardest part. I still remember the first few days just settling into, oh my god, like what's my next meal, and really just craving for that home food. That was tough.
It's really it's one of those incredible things how food can bring us together as cultures, as family, but also can make us feel isolated when we don't have the same opportunities as we might have back home. Especially if if it's mom's cooking, it's a little different than either making it yourself or having it store bought or figuring out where you can even get what you're looking for.
Exactly. So for me that was the hardest part because, like I said, again, being a vegetarian was tough. I mean, those days 20 plus years ago, it was really hard. Of course, now the world has changed. I mean, there's everything from vegan to gluten free to you name it, right? You have it. So it was a very different world.
Now you mentioned you wound up in Michigan. How did you end up getting to Seattle and kind of starting to do what you do now?
That's a great question because I know I get asked that a lot. So I came to Seattle because I had an arranged marriage. So my spouse, he was here in Seattle. He was working here, and so we got married, and I moved to Seattle after I finished my master's. So we kind of waited till I finished my master's degree. So and I moved after. But again, I know this concept of arranged marriage is also a thing, that a lot of people ask me about. But essentially, at a super high level, where my parents look up these profiles online, they do a little bit of like matchmaking, if you will, but they look at the families, they look at the religious background and some of the customary things, and then they just give you the options. They give you a couple of profiles and say, "Hey, do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to talk to this person and see if anything matches up?" So yeah, that's how the whole story happened, and yeah, and I think I got married and moved to Seattle.
Now, how did you get involved in the tech space?
So I would say, again, I did my master's in information systems. So I was, I guess, already kind of in the tech and the business space. And then when I moved here to Seattle, again, now I know Seattle is almost like the next, like the Silicon Valley, right? I mean, there's so many tech companies here. But I think when I came here, of course, because my spouse was already, he was in Microsoft. So I think that was also another big reason, right? Where he said, you should try this out. You should, check out some of these tech companies and just kind of get your foot in the door and just build your career. And honestly, and the first job actually I even had was for a very small startup. We were literally like five people in the company. So I was just doing it all. Like I was giving product demos, I was on the phone, I was talking to customers. So I think, yeah, that's when I got my hands dirty and I just kind of did it all. And then I realized, I was really intrigued and there was a lot in the tech space that was happening at that time. And I said, just learn more. I mean, that was it. So it just started that way.
I mean, it really is impressive, as you mentioned, with startups. You literally are doing everything from answering the phones, dealing with customers, to product demos. How did that help you kind of grow into your corporate career?
I think for me, just as a person, I'm always very curious and open to learning, right? And for me, I think those were the skills where I would just raise my hand, even for things at work that were not exactly just assigned to me or given to me in a box of, hey, here are the five things. This is your job. This is what you're going to do. I think for me, I always stretched beyond kind of what was given, so that's how I think I just got more into the tech world and the tech space and formed a lot of connections and, talked to a lot of people, learned the importance of networking, connecting. And yeah, and that's how my journey really started. Although I was, like I said, in that startup, I was only there for about a year and a half. And then, yeah, and then I basically got into Microsoft and then fast forward, I mean, that's where I am right now. But I did take a little detour. I went to a different company for a while, but I came back. So a boomerang, and yeah, I'm still here at Microsoft.
Now, you mentioned that's what you do for work. What else are you involved in outside of work? Because as you know, I think a lot of it to keep that balance. Sometimes I swear to keep our sanity. What else do you work on besides obviously your job?
Yes. Oh boy, I can talk all day about that. But let me also actually, I know during my introduction, maybe I didn't quite mention that, right? So, how did that whole wellness space come into my life on the journey? So, I would say, somewhere along the way was when I was raising my two girls, like I mentioned, and having, of course, a corporate demanding career and managing home and cooking and do it all, and you're also kind of the soccer mom, you're being the chauffeur, taking them to classes and doing all of it. Somewhere along the way I felt those moments of burnout. I felt those moments of being overwhelmed and intimidated, right, with everything that was going on. And a friend of mine said, hey, you should come and try out this yoga class. And I said, yeah, I'd seen a lot of that in social media where people are like upside down, you're doing all these cool things. And although I was always physically active, but I told my friend, I'm not really sure whether I'm going to do this. But anyway, regardless, she pushed me into it. I went to a couple of classes. It was really challenging, but I kept going. And I would say a few months in, there was just something that struck a chord. And I also attended a few meditation, a few breathwork classes as well. And there was something, even if it's just very small, short moments. I mean, this is many years ago. I feel like I've progressed in my journey now. But when I started, I still felt there were a couple of moments where I could actually slow down. Like I could really observe my own emotions and just see what I was doing. So it was a very different state of mind, which I had never experienced. And during those moments of meditation and breath work, I just found something magical. And that's when my journey began in the wellness space. And I decided to go into my yoga teacher's training. Honestly, I was not sure about teaching because I already had my hands full. I only wanted to do it because, like I said before, I was very curious. I wanted to learn more about what I was doing in all these classes. Like, I wanted to just double click. And that's again, maybe this whole analytical brain, right? Which starts telling you, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this for? That was really it. So that's how I got into my yoga teacher's training. I did that, and when I did it, we were supposed to teach a few free community classes. So I taught a few free community classes. And at the end of those classes, a couple of people walked up to me and they said, hey, if you're actually going to teach, I want to join. And something just, I don't know, just stuck there. And I said, wow, okay, so maybe this is a thing I should just try and just give it a shot. And I honestly just found a place in a chiropractor studio. And I just asked her, hey, on a Sunday afternoon, could I just rent your space for an hour? Because I'm trying out this thing and I just want to see how this teaching journey is going to go. And luckily, she said yes. And so I just rented that space and I had, I think, 4 or 5 friends of mine who said they're going to join. And I said, okay, cool, let's just try this. That's how my yoga teaching journey started. And a few months into it, I was almost at about 70, 80 people, which I had never dreamt of where the journey would take me. And interestingly, I also started teaching teenagers. And so I would pull my own daughters into those classes and just have them learn. Well, I still keep convincing them. It's a different story. But I would pull them into those classes and they would come and attend. And yeah, so that was kind of how that whole journey started. Just I feel like one thing led to another, and I always believe in the divine connection and why the energy and sources connect. But again, we can talk a lot more about that. But that's how my wellness space and journey started. And then fast forward, COVID happened. I switched to online teaching, and then yeah, a couple of years ago, I basically, got on Instagram, got on my social media, and started my podcast because I just thought there was so much more that I could do in the wellness space and even talk to people, learn from them because I felt like I was barely scratching the surface. Well, I still do. I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface, and there is so much to learn and to do in the world. But yeah, honestly, that's how it started, and I basically founded my company called Mindspace, which is really to me the way I think about mind space is finding that pause and space between the stimulus and the response. How do we pause to find that space and awareness in our lives?
I mean, I think that's so impactful. And I think throughout your journey you've been sharing is that curiosity and definitely that double clicking into things because I think a lot of times with our curious mind, if we have curious minds, I think everyone does to some degree. But I think, especially as you mentioned with your analytic background, you really wanted to double click into these things. And probably, if I can assume, you wanted to understand it more than anything, not just, okay, I'm doing this because of this. I actually want to know why I'm doing this and maybe why this works this way or why it doesn't work this way.
Exactly. Yes, that was it. That's why I said, like, that right and left brain kind of, talk to each other and they're like, hey, pause, why don't you check like what this actually is? And why that even helped me, right? I mean, that was actually all the more, why I was curious because it actually helped me manage my emotions, just, raising young kids and trying to juggle everything else at home and at work, right? And fast forward now, I mean, my kids are much older. They're now 20 and 18, but I would say again, adults almost, right? I still think they are babies, but they tell me, right, where they're like, Mom, I don't know how you did it all. And then that helps me think about how children unconsciously, even just, I mean, or maybe you don't know, but just, they pick up things, they look at things around them and they learn and they observe. It's role modeling without me even knowing, right? I mean, I didn't even know that they would observe and learn. But again, when I raised 2 girls, and I also shared a bit about the journey, right? Like when I came to this country and when I saw everything and what I even wanted to hopefully change someday, it was more about women. It was more about empowerment. It was more about what they can do in their lives, right? So for me, that was the most fulfilling thing when I could hear my own girls tell me that. I think that's the best gift.
It really is, and while I don't have children myself, as a child of my parents, it's so funny how much we truly listen to, whether we acknowledge it at the time. But there's so many instances where I kind of take that, I store it for later, and then you remember in a conversation at the dinner table, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. Well, this is actually how I regulate my emotions because I remember sitting in that class, and I remember this is what I should be doing, or this is how to interpret that. And I think it's one of those things as you mentioned, for example, startup, it gets too overwhelming. You can always leave and find another job. when it's more of your real life, and of course work is an important thing, but when it's your family, your priorities, it's a lot tougher to just leave because that's usually not, well, it's not a great option when usually not the option. So finding those other avenues to kind of, I think, channel that energy, as you mentioned, is fascinating.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, you can't leave. It's I remember something comes to my mind. There's one of those songs that I've heard, right? Anyway, where you just can't leave. So yeah, you got to just find your way. But I also feel I mean, I see a lot of people today, right, where they're still stuck because they don't want to make a change and they don't want to observe why and what is happening and even to bring that awareness. Instead, they fall into this escapism, I want to call it, right, where they're just like, oh my God, I'm just going to do this stuff because I just need to get it done. But in the back of their minds, they're either feeling depressed or they're just constantly in the state of, I'm just not happy, but I'm just doing it just for the heck of it because I have to get through this. Right. But for me, I think through this wellness journey, what really helped me was not just pass through the journey, but to actually enjoy that journey and actually feel a lot of gratitude for what you have in that journey. Because a lot of people, I don't think we pause enough to even appreciate what we have, especially when I see so many others who just don't even have quarter of a lot of those things that we have.
It is so true, and the book The Alchemist always comes to mind, where the whole journey is the journey, and I think it's a lot of times where we have those opportunities to be in that gratitude space. And I think about, so yesterday, a year ago, was my last time leaving the museum I worked at, and I've been full time on my company for a year now, a full 365 days, and it's been the most rewarding thing of my entire life. And it's one of those things where I just feel so much gratitude, and I hope personally to be a light for others that, hey, this can be done. I'm not so much different than any of my friends or anything like that. And I think it's one of those things that is amazing when you can get to a good space. You can try to help or at least try to lead people to, I guess, that feeling, if that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. I think there's so much to do in the world. So I feel every person can, even if it's the smallest thing, I think every act of kindness and every act of just being there, I think makes a huge difference.
So on everyone's journey, you make a decision, not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time where you just went for it and how it turned out?
Oh, wow. A lot of things. But I think the thing that comes to my mind is this whole wellness journey in the space that I was talking about, right? Because teaching was not something I even thought about in my wildest dreams, or at least teaching yoga. But it's funny though, because I was telling my mom the other day, when I was way younger, I used to do a lot of just, they do the role play and you're just playing for fun. And I would laugh because I would just make my cousin brother sit down and I would just pretend like I had a whiteboard and I would just write and like just be a teacher. And this was, oh boy, maybe when I was 6, 7 years old, or like I used to do that a lot for fun, right? But who knew? I mean, I didn't even know like teaching was a thing that I would ever do in my life. So I would say, yeah, for me, it was really how the whole wellness journey started and the whole teaching journey specifically started because that has taught me so much. And like I said, I still feel I'm learning. I'm currently doing my advanced yoga teacher training. So I just feel like I'm still barely scratching the surface.
Wow. Now, it's one of those things we see on social media a lot. Everyone should start a podcast. What made you actually decide to start one?
For me, honestly, I have just loved connections. I've loved talking to people. And that was something I also did at work where I used to, well, I still am actually. I'm actually recently on a new women's community at work, but I have always been part of the ERG, employee resource groups at work, right? Where I advocate, where I talk about a lot of stories, empowering others and especially women, and so for me, that was something I always enjoyed. So the whole podcast, I, I honestly, it's so weird when I say this because I don't know who believes in they're truly the story. But it was just one fine day. I was just, having my cup of chai, and I was just sitting there thinking, my gosh, I love doing all this stuff at work. And I talk to so many women, so many people, and they're always coming back asking me about new topics and new things that, I should bring and talk about. And I was just sitting there thinking, wow, I just did my health coaching certification. I did my yoga thing. And I said, why don't I just start something just to share what I have learned? And maybe it'll help somebody who's going to listen to it, right? I mean, that was it. It's a very simple thought. I had zero idea about how to start a podcast and what to do, to be very honest, right? I didn't even have an external microphone. I mean, I had not done any of it, right? But that was just a thought that came to my mind. And you will not believe it. I think that was on a Friday evening, or yeah, something like that. Just over the weekend, I just self-taught. I looked up a bunch of like YouTube videos, etc. Yeah, I think this is about a year and a half ago. So I'm not really sure. Like, obviously, wasn't really using a lot of Chat GPT at that time. But I know I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, etc., how to start a podcast. I said, all right, you know what? I'm gonna just wing it. We'll see where this thing goes. And if it doesn't, it's all right. I mean, it's just there's no loss. It's just learning, right? Honestly, that's literally how it started. And I just started sharing my own journey. And then through a couple of episodes, a few folks reached out and they said, hey, if you ever think of interviewing or talking to others, we would love to share our journey. And I said, wow, why not? I mean, like, I'm going to learn and they also get a platform. I mean, it's awesome, right? That was it. And there's no looking back. And just a couple of days back, we hit 2,000 subscribers, and I hit my 50th episode. And yeah, I just feel like I'm barely just starting because there are so many interesting topics that I want to talk to so many people around the globe.
It's so funny because I 100% believe that in talking to you. I think it's that curiosity and that double clicking, and feel very kindred spirits with you in that sense of, oh, how do I do this? And, next, like several hours later, I'm learning about the editing software, how to upload to YouTube. You're learning how you're just teaching yourself. And I think it's so fun because it is that rewarding. And I don't think it's an external reward. I think part of it's teaching yourself something new, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's that curiosity, but then also sharing that story. And of course, I've learned along the way, people love to help. And whether you expect it or not, there's so many interesting guests out there, so many people that I think either want a platform or have a platform. And I think it's so one of those amazing things about podcasting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I've learned so much as a person over, the year, just even starting this and talking to so many individuals. And I feel like although I was always so, what do you say, gosh, gratitude or thinking about being grateful, but I feel going through this whole podcasting journey and listening to so many stories, and sadly not always great good stories. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of unfortunate events that have happened for people, but through those journeys, I feel like my gratitude quotient has like gone up 100x, right? Through that space, because I've just started to realize, wow, like there's nothing to complain about. Like, what am I complaining about? Every time I feel like there's a little setback in life, that's it just flashes and tells me that nope, you remember all the stories you've heard, you remember all the people you've spoken to. They've been going through a lot. I mean, there's a lot out there of pain and suffering in people's lives. So it just gives me that moment of just coming back to myself and saying, you got to just be thankful, and this too shall pass. I mean, that's always been my mantra, but I think it's become a lot more relevant now as I've been going through this podcasting journey and learning from so many individuals that I just it's just opened my eyes, I would say, to a very different
I
world.
could not agree more. I think it's really one of those mindset shifts where I think it made me realize that, okay, I can have bad moments in a day, but something bad happens, I can't let it ruin my entire day. I don't even want it to ruin my entire hour. And there's times where sometimes you might need to sit in it for a little while, but I also know that I'm
Yes.
not going to allow that to ruin a day or a week or a year or anything like that. And as you mentioned, so many people have such different stories, and as you mentioned, not all stories are incredible in the sense of like there's tragedy. I mean, we're not naive to what's going on in the world, but it's one of those things that I think as well, it's always had that extra level of gratitude.
Absolutely. Yes. I think, I mean, just even as part of like my, meditation or even just that spiritual journey, right? I mean, the biggest prayer every day is just gratitude. It sounds very simple, but I don't think enough people today pause to even be grateful for what they have. So I think it's a very, very important thing. If anybody is going to take away one thing from this session, that's what I would say. If you've not had that practice, even to pause for a couple of minutes in your day, please start including that practice.
Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on now? What is your podcast called? Where can people learn more about what you do?
So my podcast is called Let's Talk Wellness with Shal, Shal, and that's on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And of course, I'm also on Instagram where I share a lot about wellness, about yoga, breath work, etc. So you can find me on Mindspace with Shal on Instagram, and of course for corporate journey. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but yeah, that's my Instagram and that's my wellness space for anyone who wants to reach out, and I'm happy to have a conversation.
Well, Shal, I really want to say I truly enjoyed this conversation and I can't wait to see your journey continue to unfold.
Thank you so much for having me here and giving me these moments to share a bit about my journey.
We'll talk soon.
Another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.